Blog Talk Radio.
You are now listening to True Murder, the most shocking killers in true crime history, and the authors that have written about them. Gacy, Bundy, Dahmer, The Night Stalker, BTK. Every week, another fascinating author talking about the most shocking and infamous killers in true crime history. True Murder, with your host, journalist and author, Dan Zupansky. Good evening, this is your host, Dan Zupansky, for the program True Murder, the most shocking killers in true crime history, and the authors that have written about them. Victoria Redstall is a glamorous model, actress, filmmaker, and investigative journalist who has spent years visiting high-security prisons and interviewing sadistic killers like Gary Ray Bowles and Keith Hunter Jesperson, the Happy Face Killer. These hardened killers have opened up to her in a way that they would never do to psychiatrists, prosecutors, or other authority figures, and have as a result revealed terrifying chapters of their lives that might otherwise have stayed hidden forever. In this chilling book, she shares every detail and insight, bringing the reader up close and very personal with some of the most dangerous and disturbed serial killers that the world has ever seen. The book we're profiling this evening is Serial Killers, Up Close and Very Personal, my death row interviews with the most dangerous men on the planet, with my special guest, journalist and author, Victoria Redstall. Welcome to the program, and thank you for agreeing to this interview, Victoria Redstall.
Thank you for having me, Dan. Thanks so much.
It's a big thrill. This is a very, very interesting book. Let's get right to probably the question that most people have asked you, or probably been asked this many times, and I think our audience is interested as well, especially with your background. Why were you interested in writing this book? And moreover, why were you, with your background, interested in interviewing some of the most dangerous men on the planet, serial killers, convicted psychopathic killers? Why were you interested in this endeavor?
Well, I would say when I was 11 years old in England, we had very close family friends that were actually murdered by a mass murderer. And another family was also murdered, a family that I didn't know. This had a very profound effect on my psyche at such a young, formative age that it shocked me, it upset me, it tore at my heart and my emotions back when I was 11. From then, I started to study books and newspaper articles and magazines and shows, and I found the most bizarre mindset in the world is that of a mass murderer, a serial killer. And I found it to be horrible, but also very interesting because it's so hard to understand.
Right. Now, how did for this book itself, you've picked 5 notorious, maybe not completely well-known, but very notorious killers. What was the criteria for the book in terms of the people you chose? I mean, you went in and interviewed these people, but tell us how you came to interview these 5 people, or pick these 5 people, or have these 5 men cooperate with you. How did it come about for these 5 subjects of your book?
Well, I probably started out with about 20 people that I'd read about, heard about, or seen on television, or whatever it was. I studied them on the internet. And if they had killed at least 3 people with downtime in between, or convicted of that, that makes them a serial killer. And I wanted to focus my first book, or my main book, that I was doing on my own, on serial killers, not mass murderers, and nothing else. So I wrote to about 20. So you have to understand it's a numbers game. Not everyone responded. Maybe about 8 responded. And then a few I got bored of, or I fell by the wayside. They're saying they're innocent. There's some that interested me more and some that didn't. And what it really is, it was all down to, can I fly out to that state? Can I get them on camera? Can I go on their visiting list? What's the protocol with that particular death row or prison? And it was basically the 5 people I chose, which took me just over a year to fill that up. And then I wrote a book, and I also got them all on camera. So I've also got hard drives filled with exclusive interviews for possible future television shows. So that's why I chose those 5, but really I probably chose about 20.
Incredible. Now, just before we start, name the 5 subjects, and then we'll go probably in chronological order, just like your book, because there's probably good reason, and there is good reason why you start with who you start with. So tell us the 5 subjects. Introduce the 5 subjects that are in your book.
Okay. I'm sorry, I've missed so many of these serial killers because I'm writing a current book as well. So with the book that you're specifically talking about, it would be Wayne Adam Ford, Keith Hunter Jesperson, Gary Ray Bowles, Bobby Joe Long, and Robin Gex. And yes, there is an order, and the reason why Wayne Adam Ford is number 1 is because he's actually the very first serial killer that I ever met in the flesh. And
wow,
he
really?
was somebody I wanted to create a documentary on. I found him to be highly interesting because he had a conscience enough to turn himself in from remorse. And that, to me, I've never heard of in all my studies, all my life. So I found his story not only very redeeming and him as a person redeeming, but also there was a victim that never was identified. So with those 2 main bullet points of this person's makeup and story, I thought I cannot just create a book on him. I can actually go out there and create a TV documentary. And that was my original plan. And there was a lot of restrictions with the San Bernardino jail, not allowing cameras in, and then him going to death row, again, not allowing cameras in. So I grabbed my moments in the courtroom. I spoke to him every day on the telephone, and I built up footage enough where I could compile, I thought, to make a documentary. That didn't quite work out, so instead he became chapter number 1 of my book.
Well, let's use that as an introduction to Wayne Adam Ford, and tell us about this. This is an incredible case, incredible killer. Tell us about Wayne Adam Ford, and especially tell us how your correspondence. Start with that, how you began corresponding. What was the tone of your initial correspondence to him to try to convince him that you were a journalist and it was in his interest to be able to speak to you and that he could trust you? How did you go about doing that?
Well, I actually went after Wayne Ford because he was the only serial killer in the vicinity of L.A., Southern California, that I could actually meet, because there's so few people in California. They're usually all on death row or life in prison. So I wanted to start in the county or in the surrounding county where I lived. I wanted him to trust me, but I didn't want to give him my name because I didn't want myself to go on camera. I wanted to be behind the camera for the first time in my life. I wanted the serial killer to think my last name was Smith. I went by a fake name called Claire Smith. And I wanted to just win him over, win his trust, with just him looking in my eyes and trusting me. But that didn't work because he didn't trust me initially. And he got very cross that I would not give him my last name. And I was certainly not about to give him my last name, nor anybody. So when I met with him in the jail, I did tell the deputy I'd like to go on a tour of the jail, which is an area I went to. You're not allowed to go as a civilian, or even anyone touring that jail cannot go to a certain unit because it's administrative segregated inmates, highly dangerous, and they're kept away from all other inmates. So any other unit I could have gone to, but not that one. I convinced the deputy, because it was a Sunday, nobody was around in authority, please let me in. I just want to meet Wayne Adam Ford. I did push the limits, push the envelope, say what you will. I'm a journalist, you got to push those doors down. And I met with this man. And I said in my innocent way, I had no makeup on, and my jacket was done up to my chin. I said, Mr. Ford, would it be, in a fake American accent, Mr. Ford, would it be possible for me to write a story about you? And he said, only if you don't sensationalize me. I said, no, Mr. Ford, I won't. And he says, well, what's your name? My name is Claire. My last name is Smith. And he's looking at me like, yeah, right. And from then on, he was determined to find out my last name. And I never gave it up. And I was sitting in the courtroom every day. The media wanted to know my last name. The defense was suspicious. They wanted to know my last name. They went to jail to find out my last name, but I kind of secretly went in on my middle name. I did not want my last name out. But then when I was put on the stand in his trial, in the penalty phase, I had to state my name for the jury. And then, of course, all the papers got hold of the fact that, I do modeling as well and hosting and on TV. And then scandal broke out across the world. And then they made up a romance story between me and the serial killer, which is so far from the truth.
Wow, yeah. So was your first taste of the media backlash, or...
Oh, yeah.
It's not even a backlash. It doesn't even make sense, but...
Yeah, the model and the serial killer. I mean, I can understand for ratings or for, getting the people to buy the paper, but, I mean, they really raped me through the coals, and it caused a lot of problems for companies I represent, like Lamborghini and Ralph Lauren shoes and all these companies. They couldn't have me associated with their car or with their shoes or with Harley Davidson. And I was dropped by a number of companies because now I'm associated with a serial killer, which then makes Lamborghini associated with a serial killer. So it was absolute hell on earth. And all I wanted was to stay behind the scenes, go by a different name, and not even go on camera. So that was my whole point. And then, of course, because I was going to do this whole show as a documentary, people said, no, add that to the story. That's what documentaries are. It's saying the truth. It's saying the hell we went through. So I did, and I exposed it. And this is why I put myself, my personality, and my life into the book, is I want to connect with people from all walks of life so they can see that I'm not, going in and asking a bunch of questions to a serial killer. I want them to know what hell I went through to get there and the hell I went through during the process. And here I am, the world, here I am for you to pick out if you want. But I'm also going to tell you a story, and hopefully you can connect enough to feel that you were right there with me.
Yes, I mean, this is interesting, what you're saying. This is normally not the peruse of journalists. Journalists sometimes attend trials, often attend trials, but very seldom interview the subjects of their books. And you're going over and beyond that with this. Now, with Wayne Adam Ford, let's get to the crimes of Wayne Adam Ford and how he came to the attention of the police.
Well, he was never a suspect. That is the whole point. He had to turn himself in because they weren't looking for him. And he has got part of him. Now, he's not schizophrenic or any of that, but there's a part of him that's got such a strong conscience that he knew what he was doing was bad, evil, wrong. Everything he was doing was wrong. So he took himself out into the woods so he didn't see any more people that he wanted to kill. And he went out into the woods for days on end and tried to stop this feeling, this overwhelming feeling to murder. We don't know what that's like, being normal people. Let's hope we don't. But we don't know what that overwhelming sensation is. But
right.
Because of his childhood, because of the lethal combination, the lethal cocktail of abuse, of neglect, of abandonment, of a brain injury at the age of 17, all these things get together in someone's head and their brain and their makeup that later on in life, something small or big can happen, and boom, you become a mass murderer or a serial killer or a crime of passion killer. And that was Wayne Ford's lethal cocktail. But the other side of it is he did not want attention. He did not want the media to know him as a great name or make up a name on him or taunt the cops. He did not want to even keep killing. And this is why he did it. So this is why he is more fascinating than any serial killer I've ever met so far. Hence, he's the chapter number 1 of my book.
Right, yes. Now, how did he come to the police's attention? What evidence did he bring into the police station so that he really didn't have to say too much?
He brought in a woman's severed breast into the police station in a Ziploc bag and took that out of his pocket and put it on the desk. That was enough to say, I'm obviously not here for robbing a liquor store. I have obviously killed human beings. I'm not a doctor. I don't do breast enhancement surgery. I am obviously clearly in Army surplus outfit, which he was, out of his mind, but I very calmly placed it on the table with his brother by his side. And his brother did not know what he'd actually done. So his brother probably feels guilty for something that he didn't do, but Wayne Ford's intention was to turn himself in and to be with the man he loved on his last day, which is his brother. And all he could ever tell his brother was, I've hurt people. And I know that Rodney kept saying, well, how bad? How bad? And even Rodney, his brother, did not know he had that breast in his pocket until they were in the sheriff station and it was placed on the table.
Now, what in terms of the confessions, how was he eager to give those confessions up, or how fast did the confessions come, or under what circumstances?
Well, the confessions were never as clear as you would expect a serial killer to confess who is now in police custody. So what it was he kept going on and on saying, I've just hurt people, I've hurt people, I've just hurt so many people. He has never, and I have all his belongings. So I've seen all the trial transcripts, and there wasn't a time where he said, I killed this amount of people. He just can only say the word hurt. And actually a lot of serial killers do speak in the third person. They're not insane, but they'll say the head was buried there, or that person was cut into 55 pieces or stabbed 38 times. And I used to say to Wayne, hold on, you stabbed her 38 times. And it's like, all right, enough already. She was stabbed 38 times. And I've got, no, I want to hear you say it. Own up. You stabbed her 38 times. Why? And this is where I'm different to a reporter or a journalist or a cop, because I am not afraid to push these guys to their limits, because they are human like us, and that's what gets the story out. I get them, excuse my language, a bit pissed off with me. I get them worked up. I get them wanting to hang up on me. And then I sort them out. I mean, some of these guys are like kids, but you've got to get a story. And I'm not going to sit back and let these guys get away with murder with me. Excuse the pun, but I'm not going to let them say, oh, I hurt people. I mean, I understand he said that at the beginning, but I'm not going to waste my time hearing a serial killer hurt people. He took 4 innocent lives, and he needs to account for that. And he's got the conscience. He's got it, unlike a lot of serial killers. So say it, for God's sake. And that's where I got worked up with each and every one of these people who've been convicted of killing.
Mm-hmm. For our audience, the people that don't know about Wayne Adam Ford or haven't heard about him, in fact, people that listen to the show, Kaitlyn Rosa, a guest on the program 2 or 3 times now, has written a book called Body Parts about Wayne Adam Ford. But what I found interesting is when another author talks about Wayne Adam Ford, it sheds all kinds of light on the character that I didn't know, even though I had read that entire book, Body Parts. Now, what I found interesting was some of the things, how one of the bodies, if you don't mind giving this up, because this is very, very unique. I mean, for all the books I've read, this is a unique aspect. There was body parts missing from one of the corpses was found. They couldn't identify because no arms, no legs, no head. But there was a couple other interesting things that were also missing. Tell us what was also missing from one of those bodies.
Well, the mound in between a woman's legs was missing, and both breasts was missing.
Yeah.
Is that what you're referring to? Yeah. I mean,
yes, I've never heard of that extent of mutilation, and I mean there are a few killers that are notorious for that. And some of the other aspects of Wayne Adam Ford too that they found and you found was something about cooking body parts. Tell us a little bit about that as well that was found out.
Well, he was left with a body that he had dismembered for the reason to get rid of it. This was the first person he killed, which is why the lady was not identified. What happened was he did cut the head off and put it in the fridge and then went to work the next day. But he drained the blood out of the body in the bathtub, put the head in the fridge, but he also cut the breasts off to render them. I hope this came out in the trial because, well, anyway, he put them to make them smaller in the oven, and then he drained the fat into a coffee can. The mound between the woman's legs, he put in a saucepan. I mean, I think that's really as far as I want to go with that one. I mean, it's quite shocking,
yeah.
But I think a lot of it is because, I think a lot of it is terrible to say, but it's just intrigue. You've got it in front of you. You've got to get rid of it. What does one do? So making my answer to you rather vague on this one, I believe that could have been a part of it, intrigue, and also to make the person a little bit smaller for the disposing of it. Yeah.
So you think there was some interest in anatomy, though, certainly?
I think there was an interest in the anatomy, yes, because it was right there. But he found the whole situation so grotesquely far-fetched and horrific of what he'd done and what he was left with, that if you notice, he didn't dismember anyone again until the last one when he moved the breast. But he didn't dismember anything. So, yeah, I think he learned his lesson on the first, but obviously he didn't learn his lesson well enough.
Now, is it possible for you to read just a little bit of correspondence that you had with Wayne that you include in your book, just for our audience to get a real example of what is offered?
Yes, absolutely. I would love to do that if you tell me what page to turn to, and I will. But let me just go back a second, if I could, to Kaitlyn Rosa. She was a woman in a trial that did her best to get an interview with Wayne Ford, and Wayne Ford refused her. I wanted to help her as much as I could. But because she felt that I was stalking her interviewing Wayne, she was very vindictive and made something up about me in that book. I must say it was settled out of court. It was defaming me, and it was not true. And it was proven to not be true because something was written by another person pretending to be me, and that person wanted a response from Wayne. So she wrote a love note. That love note never came from me. But poor Kaitlyn Rosa didn't know that, and she had one way to slam me in her book, because she thought I withheld Wayne from talking to her, which I didn't, and she slammed me, but she was proven wrong because it was settled out of court financially. So if you read that part of the book, it is so not true, okay?
You know what? I really do not remember reading that aspect of the book at all. So it didn't resonate with me. I think maybe it's not that I skipped through books, but it certainly didn't register with me, that aspect of it. So I don't know.
I think she's a very good writer. She's written some lovely books, which I've read, but I don't think she's ever met a serial killer. But she writes books on other people, too, and I find them very interesting. She's a good author, so I'm going to give her respect there. It was just that one little paragraph she wrote I didn't appreciate.
Yeah, I don't want to ever slag any true crime authors because they have their point of view, and if they get close to a subject, they have a certain viewpoint on the offender themselves. But what I find is that I'm of the camp, from my experience, my research, and my own experience interviewing someone for a true crime book that I consider to be a serial killer, is that I just don't, and I think we can talk about this a little bit later, I don't side with the psychiatrist, let's put it that way. I really don't, because I think that if under the right circumstances, and again, lots of psychiatrists are just paid well to give a certain viewpoint, and I think that the more psychiatry has a place in the courtroom, the more you're going to have, I think, controversial. I think it's going to damage the process itself by having psychiatry have too big a role in the courtroom itself. That's a good point. I never thought of that one. Very interesting point. You don't see it in America, and I don't know about England, your home, but I know in Canada it's a different thing. But again, people have heard my opinion on this, but it's for a different time. But it's definitely, I can see that in America, that there's a hesitation to take very many people seriously in terms of insane and then not, responsible for their crimes. It seems that regardless of whether the person's insane, it comes down to a decision that they knew what the difference between right and wrong, and that's the end of it. So that's the end of the argument.
I'm so in agreement with you. I could pop. You're voicing exactly what I'd like to voice. So, yes, I agree with you there.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later once we go through this, and then we'll give reasons why we both think like that, and certainly I'd like to hear what has shaped your opinions on that, but I'm certainly interviewing serial killers surely will have some effect. Now let's talk about let's talk about Happy Face Killer, because a lot of people don't know about him, and how I came to learn about the Happy Face Killer is the Keith Hunter Jesperson, a fascinating case and a fascinating killer, one of the most fascinating. So I applaud you for being able to get to talk to this guy, because the late, great Jack Olson, one of the best true crime writers of all time, really let Jesperson talk in his book, I, the Creation of a Serial Killer. And you've got some stuff that's just incredible. So let's talk about Keith Hunter Jesperson.
Yes, I will. Again, a truck driver like Wayne Ford, killed prostitutes like Wayne Ford, but the complete opposite type of serial killer to Wayne Ford. He is very, very proud of his crime. He enjoyed taunting the cops. He enjoyed the process of getting rid of the bodies and going to truck stops and talking to cops, knowing there's a dead woman in his truck. He enjoyed all of the game, the aspect, the trawling for the victims and then the getting rid of the body. But the actual killing he found quite distasteful. I find him the most distasteful person I've ever met out of all serial killers. He's got a sense of humor, but to be proud of killing someone who did not ask for it, is just terrific for me. So it was very hard to swallow, to sit there across from him 7 hours a day at a picnic table, day after day after day, knowing that he was relishing in just telling me it all over again. And I was horrified, but I didn't show that on my face. He's a 6'8" man, probably 330 pounds, Oregon State Penitentiary. I found him interesting because of what I'd read up on him. That's why I wrote him a letter. In writing him one letter, I received probably 10 back. Terribly arrogant, terribly big ego, no brain injury, which is surprising. No neglect in his childhood. A bit of abuse because he was teased because he was so tall. Not an alcoholic, never takes drugs, nothing that would give a reason for him to be a typical serial killer, should I say. But a totally distasteful personality. Oh, but I'll tell you something else I forgot to say. He manipulates that system so badly that when he knew I was not going back to Oregon, he told me on the phone, I'm coming to California. I said, yes, right. I believe it, Mr. Jesperson. I believe it, Keith. Do you know, within 4 months, the guy had cost his state $9,000, and he'd schlepped himself out here with this pretense that he'd killed in California, and he hadn't. And he refused to look at the bodies in the photograph until they schlepped him out here to California and put him in the Riverside jail. Now, if that is not the most master of all manipulating serial killers on earth, I don't know what is.
He's right up there. The other thing is that anybody that knows the case knows that, and you should explain this to the audience, where the first happy face killer came from. Why is he called the happy face killer? But I found it interesting that I did not know your participation in kind of stirring up the muck a little bit in terms of the first confessions. And so you do an admirable job, because that's a story I knew of the two characters, but you shed an incredible amount of light on these two characters and their involvement with the happy face killer. Very, very interesting story. So please explain the couple that were convicted and how on earth that happened when it was Keith Hunter Jesperson, and how he contacted police and why.
Right. I will definitely tell you everything, and it was the Tanya Bennett story. Remind me of the two people, and I'll tell you everything. I got too many serial killers and too many stories and too many, to concentrate on the names. But yeah, just can you remember? I've got the book in front of me.
No, the thing is that he didn't come to the attention of the authorities because the victims were, the murder was, two people came forward and said, hey, listen, one at a time came forward. So that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, I know what you're referring to. I was just asking what the name of the girlfriend was, because I've just got a mental block right now. Boyfriend and girlfriend, woman of about 55, boyfriend a lot younger, an alcoholic. Tanya Bennett was a woman in the neighborhood, and gosh, this is in the early 90s, back in Oregon, Multnomah County. And she was found to be killed, okay? She was dead. Now, the problem is there was some police corruption that I cannot validate, but I know for a fact, because I've got the trial transcripts and the court records and all the documentation, what happened was very suspicious, okay? And what happened was he killed Tanya Bennett, and he disposed of her in some heavy brush in Multnomah County. About a week goes by, they went out on the news that this person had been killed, And this old lady, who's got nothing to do with murder, wanted to get rid of her boyfriend who lived in the house and was an alcoholic, good for nothing. It didn't work. She called the cops. She said, my boyfriend did it. And they said, how do you know? She said, well, I know that my boyfriend did it because of what? Well, somehow she must have been given information because the jeans where the buttons were cut out because Keith Jesperson cut the buttons out of Tanya Bennett's trousers when he disposed of her. So the only people to know that the buttons were cut would have been the killer, Keith Jesperson, the real killer, and the cops. So how would this lady, the name escapes me, how would this lady know that the buttons had been removed if she had not been told that by the cops? So the cops said to this lady, he said, we'll come back, because if you find that piece of material that was where the jeans had the material removed, we will then take you seriously. So they came back the next day after she called them up. She said, I've got that material. She gave the cops the material, and it did not match at the crime lab. So they said, I'm sorry, you two, obviously you have not, Paloma, her last name was Polanski or something. Laverne, her name was Laverne. She said, you obviously weren't part of it because this is a setup. We don't believe you. But she kept calling the cops. She said, I know it, and she got frantic. She said, I know he killed her. That's because I was there. I watched him strangle her and dispose of her. Well, now she's admitting to a murder. So now she, as a boyfriend, are locked up. John Sosnowski is the name of her boyfriend. It's just come to me. And they locked them both up. Now, Keith Jesperson, minding his own business in a truck stop, he sees in the paper 2 people have been arrested for the murder of Tanya Bennett. So he sits there in the rest stop, in the bathroom, and he put a happy face, saying, I'm the real killer of Tanya Bennett, and I'm still out here killing. He went on to kill 7 more people after that. I think he killed 8. He killed 7 more people because law enforcement wanted to rush to close a case and lock up the wrong people. Now, that is what I think could have happened, but that's pretty much fixed with what I've seen documented. When years go by, and Keith Jesperson, they were hot on his tail because he did slip up on writing his name on a pink slip of a car, he then says, by the way, I killed Tanya Bennett. Now, this is 1998, I believe, or 1994. My dates might be wrong. So the cops said, no, you did not kill Tanya Bennett. You may have killed these 7, but you didn't kill Tanya Bennett. We've got 2 people locked up. Well, Keith Jesperson was not going to let someone else take his crime. So he shouted about it, and he said, no, I killed Tanya Bennett. And the cops are like, look, whatever you do, you didn't kill Tanya Bennett. We'll do what you say. You could have all these bodies that you killed, but you didn't kill Tanya Bennett. It got to the point where he wanted to prove it so badly that he remembered where he threw the driving license. And he got a man on the outside, a very good reporter for the Oregonian newspaper called Phil Stanford. And I believe he wrote Phil Stanford a letter and described, or some people out on the outside, described whereabouts the driving license was buried. He told the cops it was a different direction. He went out with the cops one direction. They couldn't find this driving license. But he'd written a letter to someone on the outside, and they had a group of scouts, Boy Scouts, signed the driving license. And in walked Keith Jesperson's brother, holding the driving license of Tanya Bennett, saying, my brother did kill Tanya Bennett because here's where he threw the driving license. So now Laverne Pavlinek and her boyfriend John Sosnowski were released from prison after serving a period of time. And did they ever get restitution? No. Neither of them got restitution, and Laverne Pavlinek has now since deceased.
Yeah, the lawyer, I saw a couple of years ago, a lawyer said, it was incredible. He said, I had to argue. It was the first time I had ever argued for my client about his guilt. I had to prove he was guilty. It was incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's quite shocking. I mean, to close the case, they basically let a serial kill 7 more people because they didn't do their job that great. And believe me, I am very pro-law enforcement. I'm incredibly pro-law enforcement, but there are the occasional cop that doesn't do the best job. And I'm afraid to say, whoever that was, mentioning their names, I don't think they did the best job because a serial killer went out to kill 7 more innocent people. And that, just no forgiveness there.
Yeah, the one thing you've included in your book, too, again, it's very, very horrifying, the crimes of these people. Keith Hunter Jesperson, I agree with you that he is the most, there's people say lack of remorse. It's way beyond that. It's callous disregard for humankind. He really did throw out these women like trash. To dispose of one of the women, he tied her to the undercarriage of his transport and calculated how long it would take, very much like if he were to have a deer trapped underneath and literally disposed of this woman on the highway, and thought nothing of it, just washed off the remains and figured that no one would really regard it as anything but roadkill, and he went on his way and spoke very, very candidly and casually about that.
Yeah, Angela Soubise was probably the most shocking, awful killing that I've ever heard about in my entire life. And yes, he went 17 miles down that freeway knowing that would be enough time to make her body disappear. However, and look like roadkill, however, this girl had got a hip operation when she was young. So there was a serial number in the pit of metal in her hip, and that was what was found. And then that was traced back to where she was seen last. And the phone call that she'd made to her, I think to her boyfriend in Keith Jesperson's truck, was traced back to Keith Jesperson, his calling card. And that's another thing that tied him to the crime, and that's what started law enforcement looking for him. Was thank God she'd had that hip operation, or she would have never been found.
You know what, if you could be so kind, page 87, he talks about Angela Soubise in Nebraska. Would you like to read that?
I got it. Yeah. Where are we? Is it like in January 95, I'd kill Angela Soubise in Nebraska. Remember the one I dragged under my truck for 13 miles? She ended up looking like a two-legged deer. Anyway, I was straying from my point. 2 months after I killed her, I killed Julie Winningham. And a few weeks later on, March the 24th, 95, I turned myself in for Julie's murder. No, not quite. He didn't turn himself in. But first I sent a letter to my brother Brad confessing to 8 murders in 5 years. A letter I wish now that I had never written. Arrested in Wilcox, Arizona, they flew me back to Vancouver, Washington's Clark County Jail. In jail, I was about to get a crash course in proper courtroom procedure. What to do and not to do. Move my case along. I was a fast learner. My brother had gotten the letter, and I had called him, telling him to destroy it. He didn't destroy it and gave it to the police.
Maybe you can read just after that as well, because he's talking to his brother.
This is the handwritten note that Keith Jesperson wrote to his brother Brad. Hi, Brad. Seems like my luck has run out. I got into a bad situation and got caught up with emotion. I killed a woman in my truck. It looks like I truly am a black sheep. I am sure they will kill me for this. I'm sorry I turned out this way. I have been a killer for 5 years, and I have killed 8 people. That's what he wrote to his brother.
Yeah, and he's a happy-faced killer. Why? Tell us why.
Because of the day he killed Tanya Bennett, and he's waiting to be caught, and he wasn't caught. And when he read the newspaper in that truck stop while he was in the bathroom, he heard that 2 people had been put in prison for Tanya Bennett's murder. So he just wanted to say, I'm the real killer, I'm still out there killing, and he just put a smiley face by those words that he put on the stall of the toilet. That's when he became known. From that point onwards, he became known as the happy-faced killer. But also, when he wrote letters to taunt the cops, saying the same thing, he put the same happy face. So the happy faces were what he wrote when he signed off his name. But he didn't sign his name. He signed, instead of his name, he put a happy face.
Now, just for, again, I'm in Canada, I'm naive, and I've heard of this before. Why on earth would they allow anyone, regardless of safety or not, maybe just why would they allow you to be so up close and personal with a monster like Keith Hunter Jesperson with nothing to lose?
I said that to him. I'm very upset. I actually did say that to him. Because serial killers do have a victim type. They nearly always have a victim type. And the ones I've met so far, I wouldn't fit into their victim type. A lot of these people would never kill a child, would never kill an old lady, never kill a young man. They'd never kill a girl that doesn't sleep around. They kill mainly prostitutes or mainly gay men or mainly homeless people or child molesters. And they don't It very rarely deviates from the victim type. So I wouldn't want to have sat in a room with no glass with Ted Bundy because he killed college types. I mean, I wouldn't want to do something like that. But he's one of very few. So when you know the mind of serial killers and why, in the warped state that they're in, you can somehow try to understand, although there is no forgiveness and no right. You try to put yourself in their shoes. For a moment, you can understand that I wouldn't fit in their victim type even if they'd met me on the outside. So, you've got to remember, these guys love their girlfriends, a lot of them. They love their wives, their neighbors, their co-workers, their friends. Beautiful girls. They would love anybody. They have their own children. They love their own animals. So they have any opportunity there to kill anybody they want. But for whatever reason, they either hated prostitutes or they hated gay men or they just thought that the world doesn't need them. That's their makeup, why they did it. It's mental, but that's the point. It's one type. So this is why I think they're allowed to sit with people and have contact visits. And, again, schizophrenic people aren't allowed that because they're nuts. I haven't met a schizophrenic serial killer. I haven't met a serial killer that doesn't communicate normally, that have had lives with people that knew them, that said, oh, my gosh, it's such a shock. We thought he was the nicest guy in town. It fits into that demographic, which is why they're graded, sometimes graded A is what they call it, but they are given permission to have contact visits with their visitor. They're not taking drugs. They're not passing drugs. They're not in gangs. They have a victim type on the outside. They don't even have the urge to kill on the inside. Not anyone. So that's another reason.
Mm-hmm.
If you're thinking of John Wayne Gacy, when he attacked that boy, that's because that boy was John Wayne Gacy's type. You remember that? John Wayne Gacy killed 33 boys and put them under the floorboard. And there was a boy on the outside that wanted to write to John Wayne Gacy. And he kept writing and kept taunting and kept flirting with him. He got to the close contact level with John Wayne Gacy, and John Wayne Gacy attacked him. I'm sorry, but that's putting yourself in the lion's mouth.
And he knew he was being deceived, John Wayne Gacy, and that was not something you wanted to do with John Wayne Gacy.
Well, I mean, deceive or deceive? I mean, am I deceiving these serial killers by writing about them? I mean,
No, but I mean, I think that the young man, I mean, Wayne Gacy, John Wayne Gacy was a homosexual. So if you're going to again flirt as a homosexual, then and then if he doesn't think that that's the case, or he doesn't think that the relationship was genuine, that's what I mean. I mean, you're not going in and talking to these killers like, again, potential boyfriend material. I mean,
no,
that's not what you're going. That's not the premise you're going in. And I know what you mean. I corresponded with someone. We weren't pen pals, you know. So.
Oh, you were pen pals with somebody.
I'm saying no, I was not pen pals. So I understand if the relationship. When you go in to see Keith Hunter Jesperson, tell us what the premise was. Why did he agree to be interviewed by you?
Because he truly believed, and I truly intended to, expose the case of Laverne Pavlinik and John Sosnowski, and how these two innocent people were put in prison for a crime that he committed, and he helped and aided in getting them out. And he wanted me to expose that. And I honestly promised him I would, and I don't make promises that I don't keep. I promised him I'd do that. But I obviously wanted to know a bit more about what I was focused on. It is why and how and what went wrong to make you kill all these people. So that was my focus, and that was his focus. And I said I will do my best, and I got both out in my book. And I planned also to do a documentary on the situation where the crops they weren't on the up and up. I wanted to do a documentary to sell a show on that subject where justice went hopelessly wrong. I wrote a treatment called Justice Gone Wrong. But what happened was I suddenly get a letter saying I'm no longer allowed to go to the jail, which is why I told Keith I'm not coming back to Oregon. And he said, fine, I'm going to get myself to California. So that's how it happened. I did say what I promised, but they record the phone line, and they knew that I wanted to expose their dishonesty is really the word.
A lot of these serial killers, though, too, if you notice, they're all fighting against injustice. Meanwhile, they are serial killers. Seems kind of ironic.
Well, I spoke to Wayne Ford on the phone yesterday, and he's very happy that the death penalty is in place believe it or not. And I said, hold on a second. You are a serial killer sitting on death row, happy that the death penalty is in place. Because in California, with the election, it was about to be abolished. And I said, why? So you tell me. He says, well, I wasn't given a fair trial the first time, and I'm now going to have another trial to explain that I've got a head injury and all that. And we get treated better, and I'm less likely to be killed where I'm at here on death row by another inmate. Because if you remember, Jeffrey Dahmer got killed in the 90s with a toilet brush because he got life in prison without parole. Now, if Jeffrey Dahmer had got the death penalty, he would have been safer, more protected. It's totally ironic. It makes no sense. But I thought I'd share that with you.
Yeah, very interesting. Now, let's talk about Gary Ray Bowles, because I was not aware of this serial killer. So tell us about Gary Ray Bowles and your interaction with him.
My interaction with Gary was, again, he actually approached me. He was the first serial killer to approach me first. He saw me on Montel Williams' show, and he wrote me a letter, and he said he'd like someone to write a book on him. So I said, I will be happy to try to find someone to write a book, but I don't write books. I actually do on-camera stuff. I like to interview people on camera. So I thought, well, maybe one day I'll write a book as well. And I went out to Florida, went through my background check, hired the camera people, interviewed him on camera, and then I also visited him the following weekend in the visiting area, where we sat down at a table from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. on both Saturday and Sunday. So I did actually start documenting him for a book in the visiting room and on camera for a potential TV show when I interviewed him. He claimed that he killed 6 homosexual child molesters. I could not believe that he could meet 6 homosexual child molesters in less than a year. Maybe he met 1 or 2, and I was going to get to the bottom of it. And what I found out, and after realizing that he has a screw loose where he seems to think that homosexual men have to be child molesters, and that is so far from the truth. It's like saying straight men molest little girls, all of them. I do believe he met one man, the first man he killed, I forget the name, but he did put in a videotape because he was this man's roommate. And this VHS tape he put in and saw this guy having sex with an 8-year-old boy. From that moment, it triggered when he was molested as a child by somebody, and he waited for him to come home, and he took a big stone, and he killed him. And from then, it was just the messiest serial killer that I've ever known. He didn't cover his tracks. He left fingerprints. He just kept going from place to place. And he did outsmart the cops, but he's got the lowest IQ of any serial killer I've ever met, but he is the sweetest one as well. I know that sounds hard to believe, but he's got a very sweet disposition because he was filled up with drugs, which drugs and alcohol is just the root of all evil. And he was filled up with that, and his wires were crossed from a very young age, believing that homosexual men are also child molesters. And I told him, after he told me the 5th killing and how it happened, I said, but Gary, that wasn't a child molester. Number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, they weren't child molesters. He said, but they would have been. I said, well, how do you know they would have been? Because now I could tell that they would have been a child molester. I said, but you spent 10 minutes with them when you were hustling he was a hustler, and he wanted to give a hand job to some guy for a certain amount of money. And they said, I'm not paying you. So that's when he killed them. I said, there's nothing to do with him being a child molester. You killed that guy because you were on drugs and alcohol, and he didn't pay you the correct amount of money. You killed that guy because he got rough with you. You killed that guy because you just didn't like the way he spoke to you. Where on earth could these people have been child molesters outside of the first one? And he didn't have an answer for me. I said, you hate gay men, don't you, Gary? And that was it. I mean, he just stumbled. I mean, it's the truth.
And you have this kind of stuff on camera, too?
I do. I have all this on camera, yeah. Again, exclusive interviews, all on my hard drive, waiting for to put it with a show, let's just say. So I've got exclusive interviews. They're signed to me. They're not going to interview with anyone else. And they're very loyal. There's a loyalty that these guys have had. I've known him for about 5 or 6 years. I can guarantee you nobody on earth will ever interview him because he won't interview with anyone else but me. That goes for Wayne Ford. That goes for quite a few people. You know, you've got to give a bit of loyalty to receive it. And I always send them a postcard when I go to different places. I know that sounds bad, but I send them a postcard. I don't write long letters. I don't do any flirting, none of that. But every 6-8 months, if I'm on a convention or doing traveling, I will send a postcard. And that's it. I do not condone their crimes. I think it's horrific. But to get these people to speak, to really open up, which is what the world, we want to know how these people tick. You've got to open up a bit of yourself. You kind of got to just treat them semi-human, because they are.
Yeah.
And Gary's about to be executed probably next year anyway, and he wants me to go to the execution. So that would be a first experience of my life. And I would go because, again, 4 years ago I made that promise to him, and I do keep my promises.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll let you to take the camera in there, though.
No cameras in the execution chamber anywhere in America, anywhere at all.
No. Now, another interesting serial killer is this Robert Bobby Joe, Joseph Long. So Robert
yes.
Bobby Joe Long.
Bobby Joe Long. Terribly arrogant. Terribly arrogant.
Tell us about this person. This is a very interesting guy. Unlike your last person that you said had a very low IQ, this guy's a very interesting guy. Tell us about Robert Bobby Joe Long.
Yep. Bobby Joe Long's a very arrogant guy. He loved, I think, 2 women in his life, loved and adored them, because they were these respectable ladies. They waited before they slept with him, and he had good relationships with them. However, when it became a stripper that he met or a prostitute, he would wipe them out like they were just trash, and horrifically so. And he's in denial. He claims that it was not him. So really, although he sent me numerous letters, he's got really nice handwriting, he's not somebody that I could get anywhere with because he's in denial of doing anything. So I don't really waste my time. But I did bump into him, and I mean that, I did bump into him, in the visiting park, they call it the visiting park, in Florida Death Row, where we're all sitting at tables, not in a cage. Like California Death Row, you sit inside a cage with your inmate. But Florida Death Row, you're at tables, and there's about 20. And there's one lady at the end, one officer, and that's it. And you've got 20 killers with their visitors. Well, because he knew I was visiting Gary Ray Bowles, he dragged his poor mother from another state to go there that weekend for both days. So we ended up in line for lunch, and there I was with Gary, and I said, Gary, you know Bobby, Gary? And they don't like each other. And, I know him from the yard. I said, okay, all right, you two obviously don't seem to get along, so let's have that burrito. Anyway, Bobby and I had a chat with him. Gary went back to sit down. And then I find out that you're not allowed to talk to other inmates. But, I had a chat with him, and I chatted with his mother. And he looks very like his mother. And then I went back and sat with Gary. So, there was a few serial killers in the room that day. I met 3.
Incredible.
I forgot the last name of the other one. But not a likable character, no. He asked me to wear a blue dress, or do wear a blue dress. I wore a red one, just because I do not want to be told what to do by a serial killer. I wore a bright red one, not an ounce of blue on it. Only thing blue on me was my eyes, that's it. So they can tell me other people what to do, but they're not going to tell me what to do.
Yeah, I guess not. Now, why is Robert Long in your? Why did you deem it necessary to put him in your book? You say that he really couldn't get any headway with him. Why did you choose to include him in the book then?
Because I spoke to a lot of cops surrounding his case. I've got some of his trial transcripts, and he'd written me a lot of letters. So I included him in my book because I'd met him. I had a lot of correspondence with him, and I know people around him in law enforcement that would tell me about how horrific he was. So I found him an interesting guy, but he was the one that says he's a serial killer, that he didn't do it at all. Yet I feel he's very guilty, very guilty.
What was he convicted of, and what was his signature like? What was some of the horrific aspects of the crimes that he did commit?
Well, it was always strippers and prostitutes, and he would strangle them, and he would beat them up. I don't think he had a signature. I don't think he had a specific signature. He was not messy. He covered his tracks well. And again, typical. He had quite a high IQ, from what I remember. But that wasn't the most intriguing of my book. But I can tell you number 5 if you want to go there.
Absolutely.
I do want to go to Robin Gex, because I must say, I put him in my book because he's been convicted and he's been charged with and he's accused of being the leader of the Chicago Rippers. I sat with this man. I know him well. And not just that, I've got all his trial transcripts. And I really, really do find it very suspicious that things changed. And the reason he's there is on the eyewitness testimony of one of the prostitutes that survived when her breasts were being cut off. And she, in a drunken state, meaning she'd just come out of surgery, to put the breast back on, picked Robin Gecht out of a lineup due to the shirt he was wearing, and only that. And I believe the real perpetrator the real perpetrator was actually the last one, I believe, to be executed in Illinois before they did away with the death penalty. I think that person did it. And what happened was, Robin Gecht is not a likable man. He's not likable. And I can see that he was the boss of a number of guys. And it was the employees he had that committed the crime but turned their boss in. Now, I am just saying that I do not believe that Robin Gecht was the one who orchestrated those killings. He had a wife, and I believe he was home with his wife. I know his daughter, and he was a very good husband and a good father. And I'm truly in my heart, what I'm saying is I think there is grounds to open up another trial and to test his DNA. And he sat there for now 30 years with a 90-year sentence waiting to get his DNA tested. So he's not likable because he's pretty angry. He's pretty angry, but you know what? If I was innocent of the crime that I've been convicted of, and I am sitting there with 50, 60, 70 more years to go, I'd be pretty angry too. So my point is, I would like to find a way to get his DNA tested, but the state don't want to do it because too many people say they're innocent when they're not. Well, I sat with that guy for 5 straight days, hours and hours and hours, again, at a table, no glass, no cage, no nothing. And I firmly believe that there's a lot of suspicion around him as well. Maybe he did not have anything to do with it. So that's what I wanted to say on that one. It's quite important.
What was the Chicago, for our audience and myself, what was the Chicago Rippers? What was the crime referring to? Tell us about the details of the crime.
In the early 80s, there were 4 men going around killing prostitutes in the Chicago area. Their signature was they were cutting off both breasts or one breast when they were left for dead. Well, most of these ladies died. One survived, Beverly Washington. I have tried to track her down, and obviously cannot because she has since died. I found out through law enforcement she has passed away, but years later. And there were 2 brothers involved that worked for Robin Gecht. So, of course, the 2 brothers are on each other's side. One was executed for the crime. One is in jail, and I don't know if they received a plea deal, but he is due to be released in the next 5 to 10 years of being part of the Ripper crew. They call them the Chicago Ripper crew, a group of serial killers. And they say the alleged leader of the pack was Robin Gecht. And I do not believe that is the case.
Now, this case has affected you in as far as that you are dedicating a fair amount of your time and focus on the wrongfully convicted. Maybe just explain that for us. Yes,
that's where most of my focus is right now, is on the wrongly convicted, inspired by a man in Oklahoma death row who I met in 2010 by the name of Geoffrey David Matthews. I will put my name to the fact that I know he was an innocent man. I know 100%, not 99%. This is where I'll put everything on this. I did get help in getting him 3 stays of execution. I proved that this person had no motive to kill his uncle. I proved who probably did, and I also found the arresting officer from 17 years before who went on camera for me saying about the corruption in Oklahoma at the time. And I sent this to the governor, the lieutenant governor, the ACLU, the Clemency Board, the Pardon and Parole Board, and I sent it 5 days before he was scheduled for his first execution. Then he received a 30-day stay. I came up with more evidence within those 30 days. Then he got a 60-day stay. I got him 3 stays. I became close friends with his mother. I did everything I knew in my powers to come up with what the defense hadn't, and I did it. And I was dealing with a lovely governor called Governor Brad Henry. Well, in 2011, January, I think the 7th, a lady got in and took over, and she'd seen that Geoffrey David Matthews had received 3 stays of execution. And on January 11th, 2011, she executed an innocent man. And I'm telling you, he was innocent.
Wow.
And this is what has compelled me and inspired me to go on to the innocent people in this country today, because believe me, there's a lot on death rows, and there's a lot with life in prison. And if anyone is going to find those people, it's going to be me, because I'm going to dig deeper than anyone's ever gone before, because this is what I do.
Yes, I applaud you for that. And, you know, you're not the first journalist and author who's come on the program to talk about, I mean, Pat O'Connor has come on a couple times. He has written books about the wrongfully convicted. In fact, he introduced me to a gentleman that's on November 28th, Mr. Griffith, and he, anyway, not the wrongfully convicted, but we're talking about the wrongfully convicted and just in general injustice. We, you know, our judicial system is a beloved system. We cherish it. We want it to protect us from these monsters. And yet, at the same time, we know of numerous cases, and America is rife with this, that there's all kinds of students in universities working for nothing, for free, dedicating their time and energy to the wrongfully convicted. And there's enough cases there and enough information. Of course, no one approaches these things frivolously. They want to know that there is a really good case. And I applaud you, too. When you read all the trial transcripts, it's incredible the amount of information it's contained therein, and how many people don't review those transcripts. In fact, all the appeals, they wouldn't go through all the transcripts of the trial itself. That's not really what the appeal process is. So it is very interesting what you're doing on behalf of some of these people that you are firmly convinced are innocent.
Yes, I really do, and thank you for that. That's where my heart really, really, truly lies. I mean, one person executed out of 100 is one person too many. It just cannot happen. And if I'm the one to help stop it and make a big old noise and be a troublemaker and ruffle feathers, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it, because it's saving someone's life and giving them back to their family, which is where they belong. But I want to fight for them to get restitution as well.
Right. Now, the thing is, this serial killer is up close and very personal. You've talked a little bit about some of the people that have criticized you, and especially in one particular case we spoke about this evening. But in general, what are you finding in terms of, with this book that came out a while ago, and actually in 2011, but with this book, what kind of response have you gotten, and in terms of attitude-wise, in terms of interviews that you've had about this book? Has people's perception changed since you've written this book?
Yes. It's because of the media making up some terrible lies and stories on me. The book gave me the credibility back that I've always had, and the reputation, the pristine reputation that I've always had and built up. So the book was good. I respond nearly to everyone that writes to me on my website, that is victoriaredstall.com, and I respond if it's good or if it's bad. But I get usually 98% of people writing really good things, and I respond in exactly the same way as I responded to the -2% that say, are you sick? You're talking about these people that nobody in the world don't want to know about. And I write back and I explain, here's why I do it. And I've had some lovely responses back from the people that attacked me originally and said, I'm sorry to be hard on you, I didn't mean to. I said, no problem. It's a subject matter which I expect people to be mean and hard. But you know what? We can't hide these people away forever, because then when are we going to ever learn as to what forms these horrific monsters if there's not someone like me writing about it? Or incredible networks like Investigation Discovery, which is based on just that. People are addicted to Investigation Discovery. That's why they say it's ID addict. I mean, I'm addicted to that network. So, I'm not making this stuff up. I'm not writing books, about wallpaper. I'm writing books about what the public wants to know, what they want to read, and what they want to watch. And there's a fascination that will always be there. But the underlying fascination, which I'd like to think is redeeming, is that we really want to stop these monsters from being made. I don't believe they're born like this. I think they're formed and made with a childhood that's neglected and they're abandoned and abusive. And this is why I think I'm a little help to society to that, but I'll be even more of a bigger help when I go after those innocent people. Trust me.
Well, I don't want to play devil's advocate, but for those, what is the difference between what's the difference between pushing these killers for information while at the same time, again, you can blow the myth away, making all this money from writing about this? Is there some balance between the incredible wealth you're making from writing true crime, again, tongue-in-cheek, but the benefit of interviewing these people who lots of times obviously want to talk, even if it's just to you? They still, not every killer wants to say anything about their crimes. For those that say you're just giving these people a venue to be able to wallow in their narcissism and their need for celebrity, what exactly do you believe, if you haven't gotten it already, what do you think you can believe and ascertain from interviewing these people?
Because every single serial killer, mass murderer, crime of passion killer, gang member killer, satanic worshiper killer is so different. Even in the group, serial killers themselves are so different. It's the most bizarre mindset on earth. You learn from each of them every day, and you learn that this life, and what I've learned is human connection is the most important thing in life. And each and every one of them has something common, and that's called they've become isolated. And isolation comes from not saying hello to someone when you walk into a gym or a coffee shop. Isolation comes when the world ignores you, and then you could end up in an altered state of reality or go around killing people to feel powerful. We are losing the connection with human beings in the world today because of these iPhones and these Facebook accounts and Twitters. I'm not on Twitter. I don't know what it is, but it's something. All of this, people can't communicate anymore, so therefore there's no human connection, and the lack of it's going to be causing isolation. I want to bring back the connection with human people. I want to bring that back, and if I really can bring it back to a few people, there are going to be happier people, there'll be less depressed people, less isolated people, less people living in an altered state of reality or hateful. Because if you bring someone out of isolation, they really don't have much to hate. Because when Wayne is a truck driver and Keith Jesperson is a truck driver, they're isolated in a world of their own with no one to talk to. And they can fester in their devious thoughts. But you can't fester if you're always connected to human beings. So I feel that by learning so much about these killers, talking to them one-on-one, going in deep, I've learned and evolved myself. Because my goal in life is also to bring back that human connection with people. So that's another reason as to why I do it. And I haven't made worldly wealth on my book, I can assure you. It's not the age of the book. 10, 15 years ago when I was about 12, maybe, but I back then. You know what I mean? Actually, my birthday on Saturday. But anyway, so this is why. There's many reasons as to why it is a fascinating subject. But as I said, I'm also branching out into other areas of where I think the whole world would want to know about. And that's really the people who've been serving time for a crime they didn't commit. That's a much, much more vast audience, and it's a much more interesting, redeeming thing for me to write about next time and do TV shows on.
Yeah, and it's not like you've just done this and scratched the surface. You've contacted 20 of these serial killers. You've gone in depth. You've really rolled up your sleeves and done some incredible research, getting the kind of information that's contained in this book, the kind of just gripping stuff coming right from these monsters' own mouths. We talked just briefly about psychiatry, so I'll just go back to it because I think it's important. Because in your very first chapter, you talk about a Dr. Berg, and he was talking about Wade Adam Ford, and he was saying he didn't believe that he really was aware during the murders of what he was doing, and he was like automatic pilot, unconscious, of course. I know from my experience that this is a consciousness that, or unconscious, but not like the dictionary version. It's a different one where you certainly are physically, medically conscious, but apparently legally and psychiatrically unconscious. Again, I wanted to talk about not so much because what's interesting about America, difference in Canada, is then a fraction of 1% of all murder cases are someone's deemed not criminally responsible. And, unlike what some people's perception is, there really isn't a lot of people ever that are put into mental institutions and let out a few years later, just let out free and to be able to walk and maybe possibly reoffend. But what we were talking about is your reaction in the book, and you add your own voice. Obviously, you're a character in this book. All your adventures, going through prison, security, trying to get around the rules. Like you say, you're a journalist. You do what you have to do to get things done. But you did talk about your conclusion as opposed to Dr. Berg with Wade Adam Ford. So tell our audience what you think about that assessment, the psychiatric evaluation or assessment, and after interviewing Wade Adam Ford and all the people in your book, what is your conclusion about that you wrote about in this first chapter even?
I think I'm getting what you're saying. I'm going to go with what I think you're saying, so stop me if I'm wrong. But Dr. Berg is a great forensic psychiatrist or psychologist, and he analyzed Wayne in the way that he was trained to analyze Wayne. But you can't be trained to communicate. And that's the talent that I have, and it's a good one. And communication with people opens them up to really a lot more than what a psychiatrist can learn. So I understand that Dr. Berg did put Wayne in that category, that he, I think, blacked out at the time. But, why did he black out? How much did he black out? We weren't there. So I don't know if I'm answering your question correctly. I'm doing my best here. But what point was he blacking out? Or was he saying that he blacked out? Because, everyone's responsible for their actions. And if they're schizophrenic, they should be punished just as much. It makes no difference. And I'm with you on that. But I don't really know the question, what you're saying. I mean, the analysis that I come up with is just having human communication. I don't have this, I have not been trained as a psychiatrist. It's far beyond me. I'm not saying that I'm, highly intelligent, because I'm not. I'm just able to communicate, and I'm really good at getting people to open up to me. So that's where I probably got a lot more out of Wayne than any doctor ever could, and that includes all the people in my book and more. So that's where I'm coming from. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Well, basically, the psychiatrist had this, he's not responsible because, of course, he can't remember. And again, you say he interviews him for a few hours and then he makes this assessment that's totally unprovable.
I don't believe a word of it. I don't believe that. I don't agree with that. How do you keep blacking out killing someone? I don't understand that. That is something about Wayne I do not understand, and I've never focused on it. I focus on he turned himself in from remorse. I think that's ridiculous. I mean, who kills somebody and forgets about it? The only reason a person should kill another human being is only in self-defense. Nothing else. There's no reason for it. We need to bring back the love to this world and not the hatred. I mean, really. I really don't know why psychiatrists want to put them in a box, because no human being is worthy of going in a box, because we are all so different, every one of us, and killers included. So it's just, you can be trained all you want, but you're not going to get out of a serial killer what I can, or a person.
Well, I think there's just a move towards believing somehow that you can fully comprehend the mindset of these people that you and I and the researchers and the authors and the academics have not been able to figure out. Of course, we can see here's maybe a recipe for disaster. Here's some things that, again, isolation, neglect, abuse, alcoholism, drug use, incest, poverty, no stability in terms of home life, witnessing horrific events. But then again, there's a multitude of people that have experienced far worse and are ordinary, productive, regular citizens. So, again, it's not like a psychiatry steps in there like they can offer an explanation. And I won't go too far into it, but in Canada, we actually believe that we have now psychiatric rehabilitation. And if you do a little bit of research about the person that killed on a Greyhound bus and cannibalized his victim, this person, after 3 years, is walking with an escort outside the institution with the promise of unescorted visits in a short period of time. It's like psychiatry, the psychiatric industry in Canada is trying to turn this person into a poster boy for psychiatric rehabilitation and reintegration into society. Because he'll never face the charges. He's not criminally responsible because of insanity. And in a short period of time, they were marveling at his response to these, again, I think it's ridiculous, antipsychotic drugs.
Oh my gosh, I'm in such shock. I've got to get myself up off the floor in my chair. I know about this case. That guy should have been shot at birth. I cannot believe you're telling me this. This guy does not deserve to breathe another day. I know about the case, and I just had forgotten about it because it was, what, a year or two ago?
It was 3 years ago, but I don't agree with the, I think there should be a difference between the Hunter Jespersons and this person, and very much I can agree with the insanity if it's proven. There are some people that have done some incredible things, and they are insane. Again, I still think you have to be responsible, and I just do not see the difference. It's like rehabilitating a serial killer or rehabilitating an insane killer. And ironically, I have a program next week. Shivender Sem, a person that was accused of murder, deemed not criminally responsible in the U.S. and Iowa, I believe, is released and has written a book. So he's going to be on the program.
Oh my
so
God.
I'm going to hear him out. I'm going to listen to his argument, and there is differences in the degree of, again, detachment from reality, insanity. Again, I have an open mind, but this is where I have less of an open mind, especially when I see a case and I see the development of psychiatric defense in Canada. So I'm not to say, America, watch out for the liberalization of your courts, but if it gains ground anywhere in any jurisdiction, you can be assured that some defense lawyer is going to try to trot it out in another jurisdiction.
I know. It's pathetic in this country, too. It's pathetic in England, too. And let me tell you, that horrible human being, Jared Lossner, who tried to kill that darling Giffords lady and killed all those innocent people and a child as well, that guy went to court last week and he did not get the death penalty. I honestly, I don't know what this world is coming to. They are all rolling over because they're yellow, they're weak. I think that Keith Jesperson, Jared Lossner, your guy in the bus, all of them have to be held responsible for what they do equally. It makes no difference if they need to be proven to be criminally insane. They killed an innocent person. We don't need to waste our time to find out if they're criminally insane. They killed an innocent person. It's done. It's done. We don't want them to ever come out of a building again. It's not even for a breath of fresh air, like you're saying this guy's walking around the ground. He doesn't deserve to. I don't agree with the death penalty because they can get it wrong. So I'm not saying that. I'm just saying in cases like this, they should not see the light of day equally. I don't care insane or not. I don't care. And that was my opinion until I have any kind of evidence to disprove that, because I am just not confident at all, number one, about rehabilitation of killers. Two, the idea that there is such a drug to render this person harmless. I've never seen any evidence of that, and that's where I stand on that. And in terms of death penalty, I do not agree with it because, again, you can get it wrong. And in terms of if life in prison is not enough, then I think that the people that criticize that have certainly not done very, very little time in prison, I would think. Yeah. If they're thinking that, again, I just talked about it last week, the threat of imminent death like Geoffrey Dahmer experienced is something that these people live with every day. So there is no picnic in prison for killers. I really don't think there is. Well, there is. I hate to say it. I'm not going to tell you what goes on in California. I'm not going to say that, or other places. But in some prisons there are, yet Florida and Texas there is not. So there's a little bit of a picnic going on in certain areas, let's just say that. And again, they should have these family members. The most important people in the world are the family members of the victim. And they do not want to know that there's a picnic out there. They really don't. And I know I write books on it, so I'm actually almost contradicting myself, but I'm really doing it to learn and to teach other people and to show other people. But seriously, they should not be famous for this at all. None of them should. But they should all be locked up and definitely the key thrown away. And I mean that with insane, not insane, makes no difference.
Yes. Well, Victoria, it's been fantastic speaking with you tonight. Your book, Serial Killers, Up Close and Very Personal, your death row interviews with the most dangerous men on the planet. This is an eye-opener, an incredible read, and you get, if you want to get close to a serial killer, it really is via Victoria Redstall, because she's right there in the room admonishing these killers for asking for an explanation for their horrific murders. I applaud you. You're one brave cookie here, and you've brought us a great story. And I applaud your new sort of direction. I'm sure you won't give up on the serial killers, because they certainly won't give up on you. But I applaud you in your new direction. I look forward to your next project, which should be right around the corner, no doubt. But thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show, and I greatly appreciate you inviting me to be on your show. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Victoria. You have a good evening.
You too. Okay, bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.